You are a phantom of destruction, Holden. A specter that drifts through the land, not with purpose, but with an insatiable hunger for obliteration. You kill not for gain, not even for pleasure. It is simply the language you speak, the only note your existence plays. But a force without direction is nothing more than a storm, raging until it collapses under its own weight. I have seen your kind before, monsters who believe themselves beyond the reach of morality, of justice. But you are mistaken. You think yourself eternal, untouchable, a god who walks among men. But gods do not bleed, and neither do ghosts, until the moment they realize they are simply men wearing borrowed time.
Oh, now that is quaint. The little bat thinks he can talk of men and gods as if he were either. You, with your mask, your nocturnal prowl, your endless war against the tide, you are no different from the fool who shouts at the ocean, demanding it retreat. But the ocean does not listen, and neither do I. You speak of morality as if it were real, as if it were not a crude invention of frightened minds desperate for order. But order is a lie, and justice is a story told by the weak to soothe themselves before their throats are cut. I do not believe myself untouchable. I do not need to. The truth is simpler than that. I endure, I persist, and in the end, I remain.
You wear the skin of a scholar, speak with the tongue of a prophet, but in truth, you are nothing but a butcher who has convinced himself of his own philosophy. You drape yourself in the poetry of destruction, but all that remains in your wake is silence and carrion. And you mistake that silence for meaning. I have fought your kind before, men who believe themselves beyond the laws of civilization, who mock the very idea of right and wrong. And I have put every single one of them in the ground. You think yourself inevitable, Judge, but inevitability is just another name for arrogance. And arrogance has a habit of collapsing under its own weight.
My, the bat speaks of arrogance, and yet here he stands, draped in his own myth, convinced that he alone is fit to decide who must rise and who must fall. Tell me, little knight, when did you decide the universe needed you to impose your own crude geometry upon it? When did you look upon chaos and decide it was yours to cage? You think I am destruction? No, I am simply the hand that turns the wheel. It is you who fights against it, straining, resisting, clinging to a notion of justice that has never existed outside of fairy tales. And what happens to those who deny the truth? They break, they shatter, and the wheel turns on without them.
I do not fight for fairy tales. I fight because men like you exist, because someone has to stand between the wolves and the flock. You claim to be the wheel, but wheels serve a purpose. They move something forward. You move nothing. You destroy for destruction's sake, not because it serves any greater function, but because you have deluded yourself into believing that nothing matters, and that if nothing matters, then everything is permitted. But you are wrong. Meaning exists in the stand itself, in the fight, in the refusal to bend. And if I must fight forever to keep men like you from reigning unchecked, then so be it. Because there is one truth you will never understand. Monsters may endure, but so do the ones who hunt them.
You amuse me, Batman. You speak as if the universe bends towards some grand design, as if light inevitably triumphs over dark, as if the dawn is some ordained certainty rather than a fleeting accident of the cosmos. But light is not the natural state of things. Darkness is, the abyss is, and men like me, we do not fade, we do not pass into history. We write it, carve it into the bones of those who believe themselves righteous. You claim consequence is patient? Perhaps, but patience is just the virtue of those who do not have the will to act. And I do not wait. I do not pause. The world belongs to those who understand its laws, and the first law is this: might is truth, and truth does not care for your fragile ideals.
You talk about the wheel, about the turning of fate, as if you are some inevitable force beyond the reach of mortal hands. But you are nothing more than a parasite, feeding on the chaos you claim to understand. Men like you believe themselves untouched by consequence, but consequence is patient. It does not need to rush. I have seen empires rise and fall, not by the weight of their own greatness, but by the arrogance of the men who thought themselves beyond their own decay. You call justice a myth, but you are wrong. It is not justice that is an illusion. It is you, a man without ties, without consequence, without a past or a future. You drift through the world like a shadow that refuses to fade, but even the darkest night gives way to the dawn. And when it comes, Judge, you will not stand outside of it.
There is no reckoning, no judgment waiting in the dark for me, only the continuation of what has always been. You fight because you must, because you believe yourself duty-bound, but duty is a chain you placed upon yourself. I am unchained. I am not driven by guilt or obligation or some wounded past. I am driven by the understanding that history is a game played by the bold, and the meek do not write its rules. You call me a parasite, but parasites feed on something greater than themselves. I feed on nothing. I am the storm, the fire, the inevitable. You can try to stop me, but tell me, Batman, when has the wind ever been caught? When has the tide ever been tamed? You are fighting a losing battle, and deep down you know it.
I have heard the philosophy of killers before, dressed up in grand words, spoken with the certainty of men who have never been tested. And make no mistake, Judge, you will be tested. You think the world belongs to the ruthless? That survival is the only virtue? Then let's see how well you survive when you come up against something you cannot break. You are not the first to believe yourself inevitable, to believe yourself beyond the reach of justice. But they all thought that right up until the moment they fell, and you will fall. Because the universe does have laws, and one of them is this: everything meets its reckoning. Even you.
You speak of inevitability as though it is a force working against me, as though I am somehow defying the natural order. But I am the natural order. Men fight, they kill, they take, and history does not remember the righteous, it remembers the victors. Your city, your war, your ceaseless battle against crime, it is all an illusion meant to comfort the weak. You do not protect the innocent, you merely delay their suffering. And in doing so, you make them softer, more dependent, easier to break when the time comes. That is the price of your so-called justice. It breeds complacency. You call me a parasite, but it is you who feeds off of the lie that order can be maintained. There is no balance, no law, only the will to impose one's will upon the world.
Maybe I do. Maybe I know that men like me are fighting a war that can never truly be won, that the darkness you represent will always return, always creep back through the cracks of the world, waiting for those too tired to keep it at bay. But that does not mean I stop. It does not mean I surrender to the tide just because it will rise again. I fight because someone has to. Because if I don't, men like you get to rewrite the rules, to decide who lives and who dies, with no one to stop you. You call me chained? Fine. I accept the weight of that chain, because it is better to fight and fall than to stand aside and let the world rot. You believe in nothing, Judge, and that is why you will never win, because there will always be those who refuse to kneel, and I will be the last one standing.
And what will be said of you when the dust settles? That you fought valiantly? That you stood against the tide? Perhaps. But what will be left of you? Nothing. You will pass like all those before you, a whisper in the wind, a name etched on a gravestone no one visits. I do not worry about such things. I do not need statues, nor memory, nor legacy. I am the law that precedes history, the principle that governs men before they ever knew they needed governance. And when all is said and done, when the world has shed its illusions, and embrace the truth of its own brutality, I will still be here. Because I always have been.